Hello and welcome back to Just Another Month. We're here virtually for the first time in Just Another Month history. Tom, it feels strange. I was going to say I can't touch you. I don't know if we can say, I don't know if that's, is that, can we say
That's
that?
all right. I can't touch you either, mate. So the feeling's very mutual on that one.
But it's it's a virtual jam. It's a virtual jam. But the show goes on. We steam ahead. We go as planned. How are you?
I'm very well. I hope you're well too. It's entirely I don't know why I'm asking. I know you're very well. It's entirely my fault. So sorry, viewers. It's just it's no. I think I'll take all. I was about to say we'll take partial blame each, but we won't because we planned to do it in person, and then I've just kind of basically realised that life this week is unbelievably hectic for me, and this is a very much a one-off thing. It's like the good old days, isn't it? It's like the days when we used to sit here and chat virtually, and it's never quite the same. I always like to go up, see Wardy's family, spend a bit of the day with them. We watch a couple of football games, don't we? And then we have a little bit of a chat, and then we do some filming and whatever. And sometimes he even takes me out to lunch, viewers, just as a little peel back of the curtain. So we're definitely going to do that next time. I'm going to take you to your local David Lloyd as well, hopefully next time, or maybe the time after. We're definitely going to
I don't know what he's insinuating there. Insinuating I need to go to the gym. I don't know.
You need a haircut. You don't need to go to the gym, but you do need a haircut.
I do. No, I'm not going to let you take all the blame, Tom. That's not fair. What we because I do ask basically insight into what we do, and how we logistically do it. Tom drives to my house, and I don't pay any of his petrol. Like I said, I do sometimes treat him to lunch, but yeah, it is. I'm always very grateful that Tom actually does come in the first place. So I can't be frustrated that for just 1 month only in a very busy January, because January is a busy month. It's a pretty rubbish month, but it's also a pretty busy one.
It's February now, mate.
We'll be back in February, and we will do an in-person February. Don't worry, this is a one-off. Let's start talking about some football then. I've got to tell you, this video is sponsored by Wooden Ground. Take a look at some of these brilliant pieces of art, handmade, on the screen right now, and you can get a brilliant discount in January, 10% off using the code JWARD10 at checkout. I've got one just down here on the screen to my left. I've also got this brilliant map form as well that looks absolutely stunning, and you can get your club's map or stadium, majority of them available on the Wooden Ground website, and you can get 10% off using the code JWARD10 at checkout. Anyway, let's move on to the next club. Do you want to start us with Burnley, because they're the team you've just recently seen? The story at the moment with Burnley is they don't concede many. I feel that tends to be the biggest headline. And also, they drew quite a few games 0-0, including the game at the weekend against your side, Portsmouth. Look, people do say that if you don't concede goals and you're hard to beat, you're going to be up there come the end of the season. And they are third, and they are impressive. Defensively, that being said, they are extremely impressive and extremely resolute.
Yeah, first of all, massive credit to Scott Parker, I think, is due for what he's doing, what this Burnley side are doing this season. They're unbelievably breaking a load of colossal defensive records, clean sheets, whatever it is, left, right and centre, an unbelievable number of clean sheets on the trot for James Trafford as well. And I think we saw on Saturday what really affirmed what might be behind it for me. And I don't want to pin it all on Saturday, because one game does never reflect a season. And we could say the same about any team that's sort of down there fighting in a relegation dogfight as opposed to fighting for Premier League status next season. He's, for such a colossal goalkeeper, and as a team, they've clearly got more than one way of doing it. But not forgetting this team also put 6 past Plymouth just a few weeks ago. We were sat there really questioning why James Trafford, of third in the league Burnley, was fake cramping on minute 70 away at then 21st place, now 20th place Portsmouth. Now, I'm not saying that I disagree with it. It's the kind of thing that, and we've literally just heard as the clock ticked over to 9 o'clock at the time of recording, viewers, that Will Norris is making a permanent move to Wycombe tonight. And it's something that Will Norris did pretty much all season for Pompey last year in the title winning season, which was, when there's a little bit of pressure on, go down, soak it up. And it's kind of rife across English football. Absolutely everybody does it. And I'm by no means saying that there's anything wrong with it. Everywhere you look in football now, teams will use that 1 or 2% moment to help them in getting over the line. And this is at 0-0, where James Trafford's team have barely tested Nico Schmid. Let's not make any bones about it. They're really under a cosh from a Pompey side that are bang up for the game. And it comes, I think it was either just before or just after the not the Will Norris moment. That's Will Norris on my mind. The Matt Ritchie moment where it's an incredible, almost double save from James Trafford. And I saw you would have seen it, Wardy. It's one of the big moments of the game. It just feels like you're fighting at the top end of a division. Surely you've got to go all guns blazing away from home. Perhaps there's an element of looking at it in the way in which sides have come unstuck at Fratton Park recently, wanting to stop that from happening from a Burnley point of view. If so, they certainly did that and managed the game incredibly well. And I hate the term managing the game in football because it should, in my opinion, I know you very much share this sentiment, that it really should be about whichever team is better on the day and fighting it out. And whoever is deserving of the 3 points on the day should get it. And obviously, sometimes there's draws in there. There is every chance that they go up, and good luck to them. They've picked up some really eye-catching results in January. If you look at those results, they've got a striking force that's running hot. Zian Fleming's immense, and I think you'd struggle to actually find a better back four in this division, having comfortably the least goals conceded in the Championship. It's not even nine. It's not even double figures, Wardy. It's nine goals all season. I think is it 4 at home they've let in? One of them was Super Callum Lang. Really, really immense numbers, bizarre numbers for this stage in a championship season where we know it's one of the most unpredictable leagues in the world. The only thing you really can predict is the occasional Burnley 0-0 and a couple of really good results here and there.
Yeah, it's look, it's a way of playing, isn't it? And it's Scott Parker and his idea of a team and the way that he wants it to set up, and that is defense first. It's a very, very strong side out of possession, and they don't give much away whatsoever. I watched the game against Leeds, and I don't know how I stayed awake for the entire game. It was an awful game of football, really. But you could just see every moment when Leeds got close, you just favoured Burnley's defenders before you knew what Leeds were going to do. And that's because there is just a real full faith that this Burnley side is in top form defensively and just get things right at the back. They're so well organised, so strong, and they just don't give anything away. There's nothing cheap about them. You don't feel like there's going to be a mistake. They're almost perfect in the way they defend. And that, Burnley fans won't say that because of the idea of a potential jinx. As a non-Burnley fan, I can say that watching them this season defensively, they've hardly put a foot wrong. And the numbers back that up. 9 goals conceded after 30 games is absolutely ridiculous. Let's speak about QPR, because 4 wins out of a possible 5 games played in January. They have lost their first game of February. But I want to speak about QPR because in the last jam, we didn't speak about them. They had a really, really good November and December too. So we're going to give them the credit now, even if it has come after those 2 defeats. QPR
below
really
us at one point.
Yes, and they were really struggling, really struggling. And it was that game against yourself. It was your only way win this season Pompey have got against QPR. And it was at that point we thought this QPR team could be in serious trouble for a coach in Marty Cifuentes that's got a real pedigree, a real CV about him, a great reputation at this level. They were struggling, and the league position was a really quite concerning one from a QPR perspective. But since then, they've climbed up the league table, and as we expected with a Marty team and a QPR team so well coached in the ideologies, they do look much better. And if you look at the league table, that does speak for itself. I remember they were 23rd and 22nd. They were losing to Pompey at home, which now we look at Pompey's form away from home was a really bad result for them. But they've done well. They're 14th in the league. They were higher than that before those 2 defeats against Sheffield Wednesday and Millwall. But a really good result against Plymouth, a really good result away at Hull, and then some great points around them too. Watford and Luton were fantastic wins in January too. Luton are struggling, but Watford again, you don't quite know what you're going to get with them. Teams that have done well and in and around them and in that league table, they've picked up some great points. So yeah, QPR they've climbed the league table very well. They look much stronger. They look far more committed in the way they want to play as well. And it just took a little bit of a click. It took a click. It took a run. It took a bit of confidence. And suddenly now they look safe, which is at the start of the season, not an absolute guarantee.
Mm.
They might now start dreaming about a late push into the top 6. Those last 2 defeats maybe have changed the perceptions, but we've still got plenty of games to go and far more points to be picked up. But yeah, QPR, they deserve their flowers. Maybe not the best month in terms of their previous ones, but I felt they had to have a mention because we got a little bit of stick in the last video for not mentioning them, and I did feel a bit guilty because to come from a relegation position to a side that are now looking for a top half finish, potentially a late push into the top 10 and top 6, that definitely should be credited on Jam. And we don't discriminate teams, do we, Tom? We always give those teams the flowers, even if we are slightly late to the party. The Marty party, if I don't say so myself. Let's speak Coventry next, because another team that have almost come to life in the latter stage of the season, or the second half of the season, because under Mark Robins, it was stale. That sacking was controversial. That sacking was quite an emotional one because of what Mark Robins has done and achieved at Coventry. Maybe not the promotion, but the FA Cup semi-final. The fact that the side was in a real place of discomfort and he got them into a challenging position in one of the most difficult divisions in the world. But he did lose his job, and then Frank Lampard came in. And that was even more controversial than the sacking itself because of maybe his previous track record in management. But so far, so good. And I think there is a stat, and I should be more prepared in telling you what the numbers tally are. I think when he got appointed, they were around 17th or maybe 18th. They're now 11th, and their run in their last few games, I think the last 4 games, have been absolutely astonishing. Frank Lampard, Tom, he's now a good manager, apparently. He's now considered among a really, really good young upcoming coach. And that wasn't the perception only a few months ago.
Yeah, the headline's plain and simple, isn't it? Frank Lampard has taken Coventry City from the edge of the Championship relegation zone to playoff contention in the space of 13 games. 5 wins in a row, the third most points picked up of any side across all 4 divisions, the top 4 divisions of English football in the calendar year of 2025. They've taken 13 points, Wardy, from the last 6 Championship matches, more than any other side in the division has managed in that time frame. And however you want to frame it, it's the most fantastic of turnaround, isn't it? And Coventry have had this zeitgeist about them, haven't they? Whereby they tend to start a season slowly. The only difference this year, of course, is dispensing of Mark Robins in favour of this, as you've mentioned there, which wasn't a popular move, and you've outlined it there. And it isn't the only unpopular yet fruitful managerial move made in the Championship this season either. I'm looking at our friend on the other side of the line down in Oxfordshire there. He's not actually in Oxfordshire at the moment, but that's another fruitful move that was deeply, deeply unpopular at the time. Because there's this phrase, isn't there? And I think it's used quite a lot in football, is that the grass isn't always greener. There's very few occasions where actually it is. And I think this is probably one of those. Just finally take nothing away from how good the run is. But, and I want this to come across in the right way, it doesn't massively surprise me, because the reason for that is, and it's a complimentary reason, it's a really good group of players at Coventry and a group that was massively underperforming. And I remember the 4-1 at Fratton Park, and I remember the moment where they probably should have gone 2-0 up, and that afternoon would have been really different. I felt, and I remember saying on the Who Won the Window video in the summer, that Jack Redoney was one of the moves of the Championship window in the summer for me, and I still stand by that. It could have been a wholly different afternoon altogether at Fratton Park, and it's really good going for Coventry, and long may it continue for them until we play them on that Wednesday away from home, which is quite a while away, so hopefully form dribbles off by then.
Yeah, I was having this discussion with the people I live with, and we spoke about Gary Rowett and that bounce as well. At what point do you cut off a managerial bounce? That's the question I've got for maybe you, Tom, and actually the people at home, because this year I feel like the Jam discussions have actually been centered so much around managers. I don't think you've noticed that. We've had some really.
It was almost a full manager last time, wasn't it? A full show just about managers,
which I think is a real indication as to sort of how cutthroat this league is, and also how is it ambitious, potentially, how ambitious these clubs are and how desperate they are to succeed, and maybe making a change is a way of doing that. And at Oxford United, and this example in Coventry, it's been successful. But when is a bounce over? I think 10 games unbeaten from an Oxford perspective. I think it's 9 games unbeaten, sorry. Hopefully 10 eventually, but I can't see it on Tuesday against Burnley. Let's say 9 games unbeaten. I don't think that's not a bounce. It was maybe an initial bounce, but 9 games undefeated, I think, is very impressive. And I don't think that does count as a new manager bounce. As for Frank Lampard, it didn't start amazingly. Does that counteract the bounce? If you don't start incredibly well, they lost to yourself, didn't they? When he sort of very early on in his time, and now they've come good. So is this still a bounce, or is that just how does it work? Because the good run didn't come straight away. It's almost like he tripped over and then's now landed on the trampoline. That's how I describe it. Normally, new manager, the bounce comes, you jump straight onto the trampoline. He had a tricky early few games. You're sort of tripping around the garden, and now he's actually found a bounce. But is that still a new managerial bounce?
Is trampoline the best way of putting it? Because on a trampoline, you go up and then come back down again, don't you, when you jump? So maybe a catapult?
Maybe.
Fires you up and then you're up there? I don't know. Anyway, cannon? Don't know.
Yeah. I mean, most of the things, though, you do go up and come back down.
This is very true. Yeah, there's very few things that defy gravity other than if you're...
I was thinking bounce, because on a trampoline, you bounce. You don't bounce and have a cannon, do you?
No,
anyway, that's not the point. The technicalities of that isn't really my point. The point is...
When does a bounce end is your question.
Yeah, when does a bounce end? And if you don't start amazing, like Frank Lampard did at Coventry, but now you're good, is that now actually just a few growing pains early on, and actually now they're clicking, and this isn't a bounce, this is just a really good run of form where he started to take on his, let's say it, principles that are guiding him to a really good run?
I think, first and foremost, Frank, with everything around him and everything... conditions calm, perhaps even in not calm conditions, you look back to his early coaching days. I think he's got the capability of being a really good coach, and if he's got a group of players around him whereby they are buying into what he's trying to achieve, and then you're really off and motoring. In answer to your question about when does a bounce end, my answer to that would be a bounce will end at the bottom of the Championship. For me, for someone like a Gary Rowett or a Frank Lampard, when their goal has been achieved or when they've avoided any sort of issue in terms of status in the division for that season. I think that is when your bounce ends, and therefore you can then kick on and look at what, Coventry will have been much more targeting playoff / promotion at the start of this season, in my opinion, than they would have been avoiding relegation to League One. That's absolutely a given. Oxford United, and you can tell us a lot more in the new boys segment later on, but I think it's probably the opposite in terms of targets, right? Barring anything absolutely horrendous, I think Gary Rowett's job is pretty much complete in terms of making sure that you stay in the Championship, as long as this current trajectory continues in terms of the results and the sort of the score lines that you're on the correct end of. Sorry, my phone's absolutely pinging off because we've signed a goalkeeper. I don't know if you've...
Let me have a look. Let me look for you.
Clocked on to that. It's I think it's Barnsley's backup keeper that we've signed. Anyway, yeah, and to the point around bounce and when they end, I think when conditions are calmed a little bit, when everything's sorted themselves out, when the dust has settled on a big managerial move, when actually a fan base begins to sort of forget about how weird it was to begin with when the decision was originally made, when the fan base realizes, okay, it was an unpopular move at the time, but we can kind of see where the board and the directors and the directive was with making this decision. I think that would be the end of a bounce for me. You're busy looking at stuff.
I was looking at your goalkeeper. Yeah, you signed, I presume, just a replacement for Will Norris, a substitute goalkeeper. Exciting stuff. Let's have a little chat about Leeds, because we feel as though they are definitely in the...
They always get a jam mention, Leeds.
They always do, and that's because whether you like the fact that they've got an incredibly good squad or not, and they are top of the table, they are extremely impressive. They are just doing a fantastic job. And actually, I can still make this as a relevant point based on the Coventry chat, because they're playing Leeds next. Let's see what Coventry do against Leeds. Because
interesting one, that, yeah, massively.
If you see Coventry's results recently, and again, sorry, we've moved on / not really moved on. Look, you can't take away a good run of form. 4 wins on the bounce is fantastic. Unbeaten in 5 is great. Bristol City, yeah, it's a good win. Blackburn, good win, but that came on sort of their difficult, tricky period of 3 games where they lost actually. Watford, they've really started struggling in the last couple of weeks. Swansea really started struggling in the last couple of weeks. Again, I'm not taking anything away from that Swansea, that Swansea win, Watford win, etc., that Coventry did get. let's see them against the Leeds United next, because then we can start judging this Coventry team properly. And that does bring us on to Leeds, who have done fantastically well. And as expected, I always look at the Leeds lineup. For some reason, it always comes. I think I might be following them. But anyway, it comes on my feed all the time. And I look at it, I just go, that bench could probably still finish in the top 6. If you just look at the depth and the quality and depth that team has, it's an absolute joke. And they're just steamrolling teams. I mean, bar Burnley, which was the opposite of a steamroll. It was a terrible, terrible watch. But that's mainly down to probably how Burnley play. That win against Cardiff was an absolute just thumping. 7-0 was incredible. Norwich was comfortable. That game was 2-0. Sheffield Wednesday, I think maybe the scoreline was in their favour. But it's still a 3-0 win. You just look how comfortable they are, and their goal difference is just frightening. I think that's also something that people don't mention a lot, is just goal difference. It's a big indication of how a team's actually faring in that position. Plus 41, 60 goals scored, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. And look, people will say, look, they should be top of the table because of the team they've got and because of the squad they've got. But it also does take quality to get to that position. It still does take good performances and good coaching to actually make a team click, because I think that Leeds United squad was arguably better last season, actually, when they had the like Sunderland, Gray and people like that. And they still couldn't get promoted. So it's not a guarantee. But let's see what happens. I've been really impressed by Leeds, and the top of the table. They're looking in a great position and scoring for fun. We've spoken about positivity. We're now going to speak about some negativity, and we don't like doing that on Jam, but unfortunately, I say we don't like doing it. We've created a section called the underwhelming side, so maybe we have just walked ourselves into some negative chat. And I don't think there's more of a negative feeling around a football club right now than Derby County. 6 defeats on the bounce, 7 in all competitions as of recording. And out of all of the sides that got promoted, at one point, Derby were the most safe. In fact, I'd say, there was a period where Derby were higher than Oxford United in that terrible run that Des Buckingham had before he was sacked. Derby County were in 13th and 14th position. Well, how times have changed, because they're now 22nd in the league, and momentum and trajectory is so important in football. And right now, it's all looking pretty downwards. Tom, Derby County, Paul Warne under pressure, a real sense of staleness and almost toxicity in some areas of the fan base. How do you see it?
Well, before I say how I see it, I'm gonna ask you a question first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I do.
I'm
joking.
If you haven't got much choice, because I'm going to say it. If I had said to you when Derby beat us 4-0 at Pride Park all those weeks ago, that if you then wound forward the clock and I told you that Pompey would be, at this moment in time, 3 points above Derby, having pretty much swapped positions with them from that moment, would you have told me I'm crazy?
Not crazy. I think it would have taken a really bad Derby County run. And that's what has happened. It's also the bottom end of this league table, and I don't want to talk it into a general relegation conversation, because I feel like we've done that before, and there's a lot of there's so many avenues we can take with that, and we simply don't really have the time. It's not for now. But if you look at the points tally and the run that they're currently on, it is quite bonkers that you can lose 7 games on the bounce or 6 games on the bounce, and still be only 2 places outside or 2 places adrift from the bottom 3.
Smacks of how poor it is down there.
Yeah, the bottom end isn't great. And again, I don't want to dig Pompey out, for example, but if you look how bad their start was, they're now 3 points safe from the bottom 3, which is great. But it does show that this league isn't maybe at the top level that it was, or maybe at the top end it is, but at the bottom end it's a bit of a free-for-all. And that's why picking a bottom 3 is really difficult at the moment, because a couple of good results, and Derby win, let's say 2 on the bounce, purely hypothetical, they're back out of it and look great. I mean, Oxford's a prime example of that. We'll come on to that in a minute, but you go on a great run, and suddenly from being definite candidates, you're all but, I'm not going to say it, but other people, you've said it already today, you're all but safe. But yeah, no, I wouldn't have said you're crazy. I probably would have said that it would have it would have taken some doing, either from a Pompey perspective or a Derby perspective. I think both of that's been true. I think you have improved, and I think Derby have got far, far worse. And I spoke to a Derby fan on a show recently, and they were sort of speaking about the fact that injuries have been a massive reason for that. The age of the squad is always quite an old one when Paul Warne builds it, and when it
same in League One, wasn't it, with the age thing?
It was, and I think what's difficult sometimes is we always sort of look when a young team isn't doing great, you sort of look around and go, where are the leaders? But when an extremely old team or an older team compared to everybody else in the league is struggling, you look around and go, okay, where's the stardust? Where's the player with absolutely no fear? Someone that can just take a game by the scruff of the neck. That's almost what Derby are now missing. You've got a real veteran side that's oozing with leadership and been there and done it type of asset.
You need more Liam Thompsons, really, don't you, in that side?
Yeah, exactly. And you need something a little bit different. And actually, their recent business in this window, they've tried to do that. But then on the other side of that, they've lost their cash-in, which is an absolutely massive blow for them. So you're juggling lots of juggling parts there. The actual feel around Derby is a really concern. If you speak to a Derby fan, they're quite worried about their future in the Championship. And to be honest with you, if you look at the form, I mean, you can't really argue that. That form is relegation form. Absolutely, full stop, exclamation mark. It's a bad run.
It is. The anti-Warne chants and boos at Pride Park, and you mentioned bordering on toxicity, and I probably would label it as such. Fans turning on a failing manager when they're losing games is nothing out of the ordinary, and I don't think you can have an awful lot of an argument with it. Obviously, it's not nice for anyone involved, and the team, just looking at it, they look completely devoid of any belief in themselves, any confidence. They're not playing with the confidence that you'd want them to. Your mate Cashin's gone. You mentioned him there. There's only a handful of people who will get the your mate reference, I think. That you tweeted about it, didn't you, at the time? I think you might have tweeted.
Yeah, I think the story's out there. Me and Cashin shared the same hotel in Portugal in the summer.
You did,
Great guy. Loves I don't know if I don't think he's probably going to want that publicly. Let's just say he was having a good time out there.
He was enjoying himself.
He was in a party town in Portugal.
Yeah, you can tell Wardy stays at some bougie establishments when he goes on his holidays.
I think it wasn't Cashin's holiday with his partner. I think this was a holiday with his mates who probably weren't all professional footballers. I'll leave it at that.
They need a manager who knows how to set up a team in this division, is what a lot of Derby fans will probably tell you. Or, as you say, their relegation concerns are massive. With the cash-in stuff, it's come... Let's not get it wrong, right? They have been worried that this move was going to happen for probably 3 or 4 back-to-back transfer windows now. That's obviously a given, isn't it? The timing of it could probably not... You could have picked a lot of better times for this to happen, I think. It's come at the tail end and back end of a window. The reinvesting of that cash, and spoiler alert, this is the close of the window is tonight. I know there's a Scandinavian lad that's joined them this evening. Unless Paul Warne changes tact, which I don't really see him doing, he's consistently getting less and less out of his players game by game, week by week, and there's little changing that, in my opinion, no matter what kind of personnel you actually bring in. This is an interesting one for you, Wardy. Of the 7 bottom teams at the current bottom end of the Championship, other than John Messino, he is the only manager yet to be sacked this season. The Derby board have been, you know what I mean by that. He's the only one that hasn't been replaced yet.
Yeah.
The Derby board have been steadfast in his support, or their backing for him in terms of support previously. There is the growing feeling, isn't there, but that perhaps that might well change pretty soon.
Yeah, blind loyalty, good loyalty. Have to wait and see. Those questions can't really be answered until you sort of see their final position. But right now, if the season stopped now, I would say it's blind loyalty, which Paul Warne's record in the Championship has never been great. It really hasn't.
No matter who he's managed, yeah, you're right.
He's got an incredible CV in League One. If you want to bring in a manager that's going to get you promoted from League One, Paul Warne's your guy. keeping you up in the Championship may be a completely different story. Let's talk about Swansea and Watford briefly. I think Derby's the big underwhelming club from the month, but let's talk Swansea briefly, because Swansea were the side that we both sort of mentioned in the last couple of months have been knocking on the door maybe and knocking on a top 10, top 6 position. But it's crazy what a run of form can do. Similar to Derby, their form has been incredibly bad. 4 straight defeats, a winless run that's gone on for 6 games now, 7 games rather. It's a really quite concerning time. In fact, since you thumped them 4-0, they've lost 4 games after that. And actually drew a match in there too. So it's been a really, really bad period for them. And look, I think with Swansea, it's challenging. We always speak about the fact that Luke Williams has got a very clear way of playing. And when it works, it's really, really good. It's a really quite forward-thinking, fresh, fun identity where it's about passing sometimes, overpassing. But the idea is you're passing, breaking teams down and playing a really attractive brand of football. However, when it doesn't work and you've got to revert maybe to a plan B or a plan C, when you've got to be slightly more rigid, out of possession. I think in possession, they're one of the best teams in the league, or want to be one of the best teams in the league, and actually, tactically want to be that. But out of possession, they are really quite, I still think, poor.
Thoughts on the departure of the club captain as well? That's a big thing.
An incredible signing for Coventry. If you look at Matt Grimes' underlying numbers over the last couple of years for Coventry, for Swansea, Coventry gets an extremely good midfielder. He's the orchestrator. He dictates everything. And one thing I will say is those Swansea midfielders have got to do a hell of a lot more running now he's gone, because what he did was just tick everything along. And if you look at the way that Swansea have played, like I mentioned there, when it is a very good, or try and be as good as they are in possession, Matt Grimes is the key in doing that. I really worry for Swansea. It's a really tricky time. You
think they might get sucked into it?
I think they have to be. A club captain leaving in January. You're only, I know it's 7 points, but it was far more than 7 points only a couple of weeks ago. And that
2.5 games, isn't it?
This league is
2.5 game swing with G on the end.
Yeah, and if you look at the teams they've still got coming up, they've got some tricky ones. They've got Bristol City, then Sheffield Wednesday. You don't quite know what you're going to get with them. Still got Leeds away to cut. Still got Sunderland away. You still got some really quite challenging fixtures. Yeah, I don't know. They're not obviously one of the favourites to go down, but if we're looking at a conversation, Swansea, their last month and their start of February, yeah, not pretty. Watford too, a side that were absolutely brilliant in the early stages and were surprising everybody, including myself. They're proving me wrong because I had Watford very low down in my predictions at the start of the season. I felt it was just a bit off. It just didn't feel right. There was quite a weird feeling about the ownership, and Tom Cleverley was given that job, but you don't quite trust that board are going to give him the chance. And at one point he looked unsackable, but remember, he's Watford head coach. He's never unsackable, and suddenly now he's probably odds-on favourite to be the next manager to lose his job. They're 12th in the league. They have lost their last 3. But yeah, a difficult time for Watford. I know it's written down on the document as something that I would say, but you saw Watford in that game when they beat you 2-1 in the last minute. Their home form was absolutely brilliant, and that was what was really keeping them in the top 6. But their last couple of matches, it's been quite poor, hasn't it? I mean, a win against Derby in the middle of it, but beyond that, that's only one win in their last 9 games.
I think at the
not great reading.
No, it's not.
Since your win. Since your defeat and their win over you, they've only won one other game.
Yeah, and at the time, I think it was only Burnley and Sheffield United, if I'm right in saying, that had better home records than Watford at that moment in time, which, again, we're kind of talking about turnarounds. A lot, the previous episode was all about managers. I feel like this one is all about teams that have either turned in a positive or negative manner, really, because there have been a lot of teams up and down this division. I think Coventry and yourselves are a positive example of that, and maybe sort of Watford and Swansea are to the contrary, whereby there has been a sort of a moment where, and I think there's maybe an argument that I could give you later on when we talk about Pompey briefly, or when we finish on Pompey, that there was a turning point for us as well. But I don't know if you can treat that game on Boxing Day when they beat us 2-1 last minute, right at the end. I don't know. It's one of those where I think you've had maybe enough credit in the bank in terms of being able to pump out results as they were doing at home. I just find the statement, Wardy, about the club backing cleverly. Don't know which game it was before. It was a couple of weeks ago where they kind of put out this nothing statement that was just, oh yeah, we're going to back
Preston.
or we're
Or
backing,
Coventry, even though
Coventry, I think it was.
well,
And
they've
just
lost both of them. They've lost every game since that statement.
How weird was it though? They went, oh yeah, he's going to be in the dugout for the Coventry game or the Preston game or whatever it was. And you're like, okay, great. Thanks for telling everyone.
Our manager.
Yeah, like
thanks for
telling. So. It's just, thanks for telling everyone he's in the dugout for another game. That I can see what maybe from a comms point of view they were trying to do in terms of just put everyone's minds at ease, I suppose, if you're a Watford fan and you're worried about his job. And maybe as a Watford fan, in terms of how frequently you touched on it at the start of the Watford chat, they have disposed of managers just to allay a little bit of concern. I don't know, but I don't feel like it was the right thing at the time. So that would be all I'd say on that.
Staying on the topic of managers being backed or coming in, we've had 2 incomings since we last spoke. Plymouth have hired the aura-driven Miron Muslic. And we don't need to go into too much detail. I feel like it's not old news, but we've had enough of a discussion on him. He is clearly someone who has come in with a real sense of. We all saw that viral first meeting. He comes in with an incredible. It is aura and sort of charisma about him. And I think the point should not maybe be hit the reaction to him coming in, because he's been in a while now, actually. It should actually be the last couple of weeks, because there has been a real improvement, a really good point at Sunderland, a fantastic win, but it needed to be backed up and needed to be almost used as a springboard. And that win against West Brom the following weekend was certainly that. I thought when they lost 5-0 at home to Burnley, I did think it was over. I thought it was over, really, even though he did come in, because of I just do not rate that Plymouth squad. It's a bottom 3 squad, if we're being brutally honest with you. And the fact that they've been cut adrift so early is not a good start. But incredibly, Tom, Plymouth Argyle, who had Wayne Rooney in charge for a large part of the season, the majority of the season, who have been absolutely rinsed time and time again, are now, after these last 2 games, only 4 points from safety. I mean, Plymouth were, the conversation this season when relegation has been, right, Plymouth are down. Who are the other 2? A win against West Brom, a fantastic point against Sunderland. Miron has started to see that bounce that he needed to see. And they are now actually in the conversation to stay in the league, which I cannot believe it. Credit to Plymouth.
You could say he's starting to Muslic back a little bit of. No, we're not getting there.
That wasn't one of your best. I don't even know what you're trying to say. What were you trying to say?
You know, when you muscle back a little bit of control, right. That was where I was going. But
it was dreadful.
It was
luckily
shocking.
That's going to stay in.
That might not even make it in. That's how bad that was.
No, it was so bad. I think it's going to stay in.
Okay, cool. It's a big win against a West Brom side that actually West Brom are kind of, and if you want to do a bit of a hybrid point on this one, we absolutely can, because West Brom are next up on the list to talk about, but they were
doing together, in a
why
way.
not? Why not? The reason I mentioned them sort of coexisting is West Brom on the absolute high of having only recently put 5 past us at the Hawthorns and the return of Tony Mowbray, and actually it was something before that game where they did score 5, whereby Tony Mowbray's return had brought this sort of euphoric emotion, and it's a really lovely story about his sort of, the initial worries about him, whether he'd even managing football again and having return following his treatment. And it was great from just sort of a footballing point of view, not even a club bias point of view, to see a man as well thought of in the world of football as Tony Mowbray back on the touchline. That came with the emotional tinge to it, but it also came with these guys are, they've got him back. He's back in football, back managing West Brom. They put 5 past us, and actually any fears that maybe West Brom fans might have had about Tony Mowbray's side being able to, yes, conduct everything in terms of proceedings with possession and have all the opportunities, but actually having no killer instincts that just they ended up in the back of the net, all that final third stuff that we talk about a lot, heading down to Home Park, which, yes, Home Park has been a better stomping ground for Plymouth than games away from home have been, and take maybe the Sunderland draw out of that, because that's a massive point. Plymouth have been shipping goals left, right, and centre away from home of late, and they've been let's not make no bones about it. Plymouth have been the Championship laughing stock away from home, and I know you could maybe consider us in, what a game at the Riverside, by the way. You could maybe consider us in that as well, in terms of the amount of goals that we've been shipping from a Pompey point of view. But yeah, I think it's a result that no one saw coming. I think it's a definite penalty. And then Ryan Hardy's second of the afternoon is just audacious. And I think it's probably one of the best finishes that Plymouth fans are going to get to enjoy this season, albeit they haven't scored an awful lot of goals. The goal difference, Wardy, from a Plymouth point of view, still concerns me quite a lot. They've conceded, obviously, the most of any other side in the league in -33.
It's not great, is it?
Yeah, 63 conceded. -34 is, and you look at the next closest to that, and I believe it is ourselves on 52. So there's quite a lot of goals in between there. And I worry that you're saying about it only being a 4-point gap. And if they are to make a real fist of this, the goal difference is always going to be to their detriment. And that would be my concern. If it does come down to a handful of points, Plymouth have an uptick in form, and all of a sudden we are starting to consider them back in this kind of fighting to stay up conversation. Is there going to be a detriment to them that's, like a cloud that's always hanging over you, or some kind of overreaching concern would be that goal difference for me. And I hope that's a good enough West Brom / Plymouth sort of hybrid moment. And I feel like Pompey have kind of been a bit of an undertone to this whole conversation. So feel free to just bypass chat on that if you want, and go straight to Oxford to finish up, unless you had anything more to add in terms of Plymouth or West Brom.
Finally, new boys, Tom. Let's chat about the new boys, excluding Derby, because we've touched on Derby a lot earlier on in the show. Maybe not in the light they would have wanted to be shone in, but it's time we speak about our clubs. So strap in.
This won't be long, I promise. This won't be long.
Let's start with Pompey. I think we sometimes start with Oxford recently because it's been a slightly more positive feel about things. But Tom, I'm still really unsure as to what a Pompey. I mean, I don't know. A Pompey good? What are you? Are you good? Are you all right? Are you good sometimes? Are you still going to get relegated? What are you? I don't know.
I am at risk of making myself into a meme. I don't think we're going to go down. And you can quote me on that at any point. I think the January business, which we can talk about briefly, I suppose, and I know we want to focus on kind of on-field matters in Jam, as we always do, and I'll point you towards this wonderful chap's transfer window video that will be out on the channel very soon, if not already out. I think the business smacks of, I don't want to call it the bare minimum, but I think we're kind of, the business is reflective of probably the aims this season, which is just about stay up. I think that, that you can't exactly say that our January business has been phenomenal, because it hasn't been, but also there are a few little diamonds in there. I think Adil Al-Jish is a really, really good pickup. Messino described it as a real coup to bring him into the club, which I think I'd agree with. And also Hayden Matthews offers that little bit of stardust as a defender, led to believe that Cade Gordon's going to be done pretty soon, which is exciting. At the time of recording, that hasn't actually come out yet, but expecting it to be by the time you see this. So there's bits and pieces. There's strength. We've plugged holes accordingly. We've done the business we've needed to do, but we haven't set the world alight. And I think that's probably reflective of the season as a whole, really, is that, yes, we've beaten Middlesbrough at Fratton Park. That probably is the result of the season. Yes, we've held Sheffield United, Luton and Burnley, all three relegated Premier League sides, to 0-0s on our own turf, which is great.
Leeds, when you look back now.
Good point against Leeds, and probably a good point away at the Riverside against Middlesbrough when you look back as well. I just think if we're focusing on sort of January and Jam, we need... I tweeted at the start of the January sort of as a month and said that pretty much every single one of our home games is a must win, because I didn't see us picking up any points away from home whatsoever. As it turns out, we didn't pick up any points away from home whatsoever. So I was pretty spot on about that. But what I didn't see was us actually pretty much winning every game, bar that Millwall one at home at Fratton Park, which is a real saving grace. It's not something we can wholly depend on. It's something we're sort of leaning on the shoulder of at the minute as something that's keeping us going in terms of the home form and the results. And we've beaten some really good sides at Fratton Park already this season. Swansea at the time was a better result than it would be if you played them now, I think, beating them. I think Bristol City at Fratton Park, I think beating Coventry, given what they've gone on to do. We've already outlined it in the show so far. I think it's, it's been, I'm feeling okay. No one's hitting panic buttons, really, I don't think. And if they are, they really ought not to be, because there's no need to, in my opinion. We have a real asset in terms of keeping... Sorry, things are going off all the time. I'm led to believe that Tom McIntyre will be leaving the club shortly, Wardy.
Wow.
He might not by the time we see this, but there we go.
We've had a few departures too. That's why we've had Carl Edwards has joined Stevenage. So it's all kicking off. That's what happens when you film on deadline day.
It's all kicking off. I'm feeling okay. I think one of our massive USPs and one of the assets about us at the minute is the fact that we have stuck with Messino. And I remember saying quite sort of famously on this show, I think it was last episode, if not the one before, that I think it would probably be the single biggest and best decision we make is standing by Messino until at the very earliest, the end of this season. Looks like, well, I'm absolutely sure that we are going to do that. And I think that's probably the best thing for all involved, the best thing for him, the best thing for the football club, and the best thing for the future of our sort of, if we want to remain in the Championship. And that's where we are. Tell us about Gary Rowett's cooking yellows.
Well, last time, Tom, we had this conversation. You said I wasn't allowed to say we're cooking. I wasn't allowed to say Oxford United were cooking. You said you can't say you're cooking. You've only won 2 games.
Oh, God.
Since then, we have done pretty well.
Can you spot the gloat, everyone? Can you spot him?
I say that. We've won 3 games. We've beaten Millwall as well. And you said that Millwall was the result that you're most impressed by, which I think is fair enough, because to go to Millwall and win is always a good result. However, since then, we have won every home game, bar one. That was the Bristol City result of the weekend. And we've looked really, really good. And the best way... I feel like I've spoken quite a lot about Oxford United and Gary Rowett. The key points, the key headlines is he's made us far more organised. We look far stronger in and out of possession. Transition is the way we want to play, and being really, really strong at protecting our box. And that is what we've come in to do. Structurally, we look far more on it. That's benefited individuals too, just because as a team we look better. By being better as a team, we've looked better individually as well. Players like Will Volks look like a completely different player. Using Placheta in a better way, with his confidence now flowing, he looks really good.
Defensively, sorry to cut across you. I was on the Placheta train quite early with you, and I don't know if you remember me telling you how much I liked him, and you told me you liked him, and I told you I liked him back. I think he's really flourishing, isn't he?
He is. And then after you said that, Tom, he looked like a really, really, really poor winger. And then now he's good again. I think there's clearly a real talent. And with all of these players, there's clearly a great talent about them. It just takes sometimes a few tweaks. And that's what Gary Rowett's come in. He's made some really, really good changes and positive changes that is transforming us. As for our window, briefly, without sort of trying to spoil tomorrow's video, really, really happy with it. And I think finally, it feels like we've never had this before. We're going into deadline day knowing we're not going to do any business because we're happy with the business we've done. And we're not even looking around going, can we do one more? There will be fans that go, can we bring in another striker? Because it seems to be, on deadline day as fans, you always want to sort of see your business, you see your team do some kind of business. But if we're looking at it from a truly just sensible point of view, we did our business early. We set the tone with our business. For so many years, Oxford United in January, we've been in League One. We've been pipped but our best players have been pipped to Championship clubs. And finally, this season, we've been able to give it back. We went to Huddersfield and said, okay, we want your centre half in Helix, and we know we'll have him. And we brought him in. And I think that's the statement signing so far, was that signing from Huddersfield, and he's played every game since then, and he's been an absolute monster at the back. And yeah, we've been very ambitious. 1 million plus fees paid for players, which for Oxford United is just incredible. Some really positive loans. A real balance, a bit more experience in bringing in Bradshaw. I think we've just had a really good all-round window. So really happy with Oxford, really happy with the run that's continuing to go. And we spoke earlier with Coventry. I don't think this is a bounce. This is just a manager that's come in, reminded this group that there's some real talent in this squad, made some really sensible tweaks, structural, tactical tweaks, and we look like a really difficult team to beat. Having said that, against Bristol City, there probably was a bit of a concern we couldn't win that game. And that just shows where we've got to now. We're frustrated. There were obviously two red cards in that game. One was very late. For a large period of the match, they were playing with 10 players. Sometimes can benefit a team, sometimes it can't. But to walk away feeling that we felt quite hard done by against Bristol City, the fact that we couldn't win that game, not because it's out of our control, but because I think we let ourselves down maybe in that moment not to take advantage. Stoke, we could have won that game. Plymouth, again, felt like a disappointing result. We've looked really, really good, and we haven't lost a game in this. In January, we're still unbeaten in 2025. The run keeps on going, and we've got a manager that is ultimately hitting the expectation that we wanted him to hit, and that was Oxford staying in the league. And remember, everybody thought we were going to get relegated at the start of the season, and we started the season really well. Then we had a real drop off, and everybody was then going, "Told you so! Told you these lot we're gonna get relegated." And then we just keep punching back. It did take a sacking for us to punch back, but in hindsight, the hierarchy of football clubs have got to make difficult decisions, and they made an extremely difficult decision.
Paid off, though.
Their priority was to stay in the league, and they felt more benefit in prioritising this current season. You can't argue with that. Sometimes you've got to make a decision that can benefit the business and benefit Oxford United. There's far more money in staying in the Championship than there is getting relegated into League One. And let's be honest, we don't know how Des Buckingham would have done on this run, but it's hard to say the evidence in his previous matches before he lost his job. It would have gone as well as Gary Rowett has seen things go. So happy, really good, Tom. Really, really good show. I feel like we've gone into some great detail today. And although it was virtual, slightly different to the last couple of months, and in Jam history, we've never done one online. But I'm happy with what the conversation we've had. It's been great. I've enjoyed it.
I can't believe that we said we'd do this for half an hour, and this is nearly an hour-long Jam. So really hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking with us right to the end. And thank you for having me again, mate.
It's been good. It's been really, really good. Take care as well. Also, you would have seen the sponsor at the start of the show, but remember, this is brought to you by Wood and Ground. Use discount code JWARD10 at checkout. We haven't got any art with us, sorry, so we can't show you in person. Oh no, we can.
Be back.
Move my head there. You can see it. You can see it. It's not great, but we will have some really good footage on the screen to see just how good those pieces of work are. Until next time, I've been Jack. That's been Tom, and we'll see you very, very soon. Take care.